Hi, and welcome to Dittmer Knittery. Whether you are a new viewer or a returning viewer, I'm really happy to have you here. Thank you for watching. My name is Bev, and you can find my you can find my contact information in the description box below. If you like what you see, please like, subscribe, share, and make a comment or just watch and enjoy. I appreciate that. Today, I continue a series of videos I'm making about the May Day project, the May Day bag project, and I'm just kind of taking you along with me. Not a tutorial, just sharing my journey. I appreciate you being here with me. And in today's video, you get to see that I actually do start knitting the bag. And you can see that it doesn't take long to knit rows, to make rows of knitting on the machine after the setup and the cast on. And it's not very interesting to watch, just back and forth making rows of knitting. And I can only get so close and show so much detail without my camera and my lighting getting in the way of those tall tensioners and the yarn. And again, the tension is really important. So if my yarn or my tensioners get hung up on my lighting, then it causes an error or jam or problem. So I'm kind of just showing you the steps in the process that take more time, the details, the things that make the project come together. I've been trying to keep these videos at a reasonable length, so I have some clips for you, and let's get started. Here's a view of my knitting machine and where I sit to work on the knitting machine. So this is a corner of the knittery. I have a nice table. The knitting machine clamps to that table. I have my chair there and my light, and let's get a little closer. There's the needle bed of the machine, and you see the rod right in the center, and then up to that tensioner. And so I wanted you to see the whole thing as best as you could, as well as I can get it, and then get a little up close to explain a little more. Here's the needle bed, and I've pulled out some of the needles so you can get a look at them and see that they really are hooks. And they have a little latch on them. Each one of them has a little latch that helps hold the yarn in place. There's a clamp. I said the machine clamps to the table. And the head of the machine, which moves back and forth across the bed, pushes the needles out, loops the yarn on, and forms a stitch. Pulls the needle out, puts the yarn on, pushes the needle back. Now, you can position the needles in such a way that some of them knit and some of them do not knit. There are small markings on the machine that I doubt you can see to indicate where to push the needles so that they knit or do not knit. And there's also these little levers on the side of the head that you can move back and forth that change
the behavior and which stitches knit and which stitches do not knit. Now again, I've really done only basic work with this machine, so I have an understanding of how those things work, but I haven't used them very much. I mostly do the back and forth basic knitting. This dial here helps with stitch width. It doesn't have a very wide range, but depending on, the numbers indicate your yarn weight. Depending on your yarn weight and whether you are using every needle or every other needle, you can move this knob to help with stitch width. I generally kind of leave it in the same place because I generally do a lot of the same thing. The post holds this first guide from the yarn. See, there's the yarn, the two balls of yarn, the two blues of balls of yarn. There's the two strands of blue yarn come up to this tensioner. It has some digits on it, and I do move this. This is how tight the yarn is held as it feeds through here. So if it's too tight, the yarn won't feed well. If it's too loose, it kind of flops around. So I do a lot of times move that depending on the weight of my yarn. And then all the way up here, we have this tensioner. And this is a rod, a spring rod that moves as the head of the machine moves back and forth. And that, like I said, tension is important with every kind of knitting. And this, the way this yarn is fed through here is fed through this machine is what creates the proper tension. And then I don't have it threaded through the machine. I have it, my yarn, my working yarn is on that little holder right there until I get ready to insert it into the head of the machine, and the yarn will feed right through this guide right there. And the machine has the ability to have two yarns threaded at once. So what I usually do is I thread through my waste yarn. That's this one. And then I thread through the next yarn I'm going to use. And then once I finish with the waste yarn, I'll take that out and I'll thread through the next color I'm going to use if I'm going to change colors. And again, this is wool yarn. It's going to be felted. So you can join it with a wet splice. And that's how I generally join it, is I just snap the yarn, break the yarn with my hands, and join it with a wet splice. This is our sample we made. And it is on these cords that are part of a interchangeable needle set that work just great for holding my stitches in place until I'm ready to finish off or continue working on that piece. And yes, I do have my mini barbells there holding my yarn in place so that the yarn doesn't flop around on the table. So it stays in place. That helps the feeding of the yarn through the machine. And here are some of the tools. And these tools serve the same function, these two, depending on how many stitches, if you'll be working every needle or every other needle. So that they push the needles back and forth, which you can do by hand, but these tools move several needles back and forth at one time. These are some fantastic tools that came with the machine. This allows you to manipulate stitches, increases, decreases, move stitches from one set of needles to another set of needles, one needle to another needle. And this is a latch hook, a two-ended latch hook, which I know what a latch hook is. I've seen one before, but I had never used one before. And man, is that just the neatest tool. I love this thing. Love, love, love it. And it took me a while to get good at all at using these tools, but with some practice, I've gotten fairly good at it. These are the weights that actually claw onto the knitted work as you knit it to give weight to the piece, to give it, again, to create the proper tension so that the stitches stay on the needles. And these are actually called claw hooks, and they're not extremely heavy, but they're weighted enough to hold the edges of the yarn in place, the edges of the work in place. And this, again, is called a cast-on comb. And it is used right at the beginning of the work to weight those first stitches, the cast-on, and it goes across the whole length of the work instead of just on the edges like the claws do. The claws are enough once the work gets started just to put on the edges of the work. And I do have 3 pieces of this cast-on comb and clips to join them so that I can have a longer cast-on comb. If I'm casting on many stitches and doing a wider work, I can have a cast-on comb that accommodates that and will hook on to all of the stitches. And I did show that on the sample, and I'll probably show it again. The source of my information, anything I know, came from watching videos by Susan Guglielmi. I'm probably not saying it right at all, so I'm letting you see it there. And the machine did come with a booklet that was very, very helpful for getting started. This is what I mean when I say you can use this tool to move the needles into position. And then with the other side of the tool, you can move just every other needle. And with this other tool, you can move 3 needles at a time or every 3rd needle. So that's really helpful. That's really cool. And again, if you're working on using only every other needle, these things are especially helpful. And of course, you can hand manipulate any of these needles and pull them into place. But when you're moving multiple needles around, it's nice to have the tools. This is the head of the knitting machine. Silver reed, LK150. The head of the machine does detach for cleaning, and if you should get a jam, you might have to take it off of the machine to clear the jam. This is the guide where the yarn goes through, and on the other side, just brushes and wheels and guides, and brushes and wheels. And yes, it even though I've been doing it for some time, it does seem somewhat like magic. I have cast on to the knitting machine with my waste yarn. It's weighted with the cast on comb. And I did show a little bit more detailed demonstration of casting on when I did the sample a few videos ago. And now I'm ready to add the 1 row of ravel cord before I start the working yarn. Pausing because there's a little tangle in the ravel cord. Just making sure that's cleared. And there, we'll be ready to start with our working yarn. As promised, I've begun to knit the May Day bag on the machine. I'm using 2 strands of pallet yarn sky blue and a more kind of aqua blue. And I've knit 2 rows. I'm going to knit a total of 26 rows with these 2 yarns held together, and then I'm going to change color. I still have the cast on comb on for the weight. I'll probably do 2 more rows and then change over to the claws. And when I pause, it's usually because I'm preparing the yarn to go through. At the very beginning of the ball wound on the machine, sometimes that beginning of it is a little tight and I have to actually pull the yarn out of the cake so that it doesn't cause too much tension on the machine as it tries to pull itself out of the cake. I hope that makes sense. Anyway, when I pause, it's to make sure the yarn is ready to feed through. And there I have 4 rows of knitting in the working yarn, the first color, and I'm going to add these claw weights to the very edge, each edge of my knitting. And then I can remove this cast on comb that was weighting the whole length of the yarn. And that weight and the claw weights, like I said, are to ensure that those edge stitches don't come off the needles. Now, when I have a piece this wide, I like to add a little bit more weight, a little bit more stability. So I just use a large binder clip and I clip it on there. And I check my stitches every row to make sure that there's a stitch on every hook. And it's a good stitch. My yarn tried to tangle right there. Because it's wool yarn, it likes to stick or cling to itself. So I've just found, keep an eye on the yarn and make sure a tangle or a knot isn't coming on into the head onto the needles.
I hope you're enjoying this as much as I am. I feel as though this video project has been building for a while. An idea that's finally getting its time. I've wanted to plan ahead and make videos ahead of time, and things just kind of fell in place when I decided to just take you along with me and show you the different things that I do to put something like this together. So I hope you'll come back and see what's next. Take care of yourself, take care of each other, and I will see you again soon. Thanks for watching.